It was a random Tuesday that tore a hole in the version of reality I thought was solid. The sun had already dipped behind the skyline, and I was riding in a cab home from a client dinner downtown, nothing fancy, just a couple of drinks and sliders at one of those rustic industrial places. I was checking emails on my phone, half distracted, when the cab rolled to a stop at a red light near Ellington Street. It was one of those long lights that always tests your patience. Out of habit, I glanced up, just in time to see a woman stepping off the curb. She had that familiar way of adjusting her coat, one arm slipping into the sleeve before the other. A navy blue wool number with the collar flipped up. I knew that coat. I sat up a little straighter. She turned slightly, laughing at something the man next to her said, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. Ellie. My wife. Laughing. Smiling. Standing far too close to a man I didn't recognize. Mid-30s maybe, tailored blazer, confident posture. She touched his arm as he opened the door to a sleek black Audi. Then she got in. Just like that. No hesitation. My stomach dropped. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel in slow motion, like one of those TV shows where the husband is the last to know. She had told me that morning she had a late team meeting. That it might run long. Something about end-of-quarter strategy planning. I had believed her without a second thought. Why wouldn't I? We were fine, at least I thought we were. But now I couldn't look away. The light changed, but I didn't say anything. The cab driver glanced in the rearview, then tapped the gas. I slumped back into my seat, my mind racing. I didn't even think to snap a photo or get the license plate. I was too stunned, too busy trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I just seen. I got home before she did. I sat on the couch in the dark, my phone still in my hand, rereading our last text thread. She'd sent me a smiley face around 6 saying, "Don't wait up, this meeting might go late. Love you." I stared at the words until they blurred. When she finally came through the door just after 10:30, she looked composed. Her lipstick had been wiped off, but I could still smell a trace of her perfume, different from her usual, something sharper, muskier. "Hey," she said, tossing her bag down and kicking off her shoes. "Sorry I'm so late." That meeting went in circles. "I'm beat." She didn't look beat. She looked calculated. Every move seemed like it had been rehearsed. A tired sigh. A glance at me. A soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. She came over, sat next to me on the couch, and picked up the remote like everything was normal. "You okay?" she asked. I shrugged. "Long day." There was a silence that settled between us. Not comfortable silence. The kind that stretches too long, that fills the space between words that should have been said. Then she turned to me, sudden and serious. "Jake, we should talk. About us." The phrasing caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. She reached for the throw blanket on the back of the couch and wrapped it around her legs, stalling. "I don't know. I've just been feeling overwhelmed. Like we've lost our rhythm. And I feel like you've been watching me a lot lately. Like you don't trust me." That's when I knew she was flipping it. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She sighed. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I just think maybe we need to take a step back and give ourselves some breathing room. Like a trial separation. Just time to think. Space to figure things out." My chest tightened. Where's this coming from? But I already knew. I'd seen her. I'd seen her get into that man's car like she'd done it before. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. And now here she was feeding me a line about needing space. About me being the one who was too watchful. Too tense. Too present. It was all so polished. So smooth. Like she'd practiced this in her head already. Maybe even rehearsed it with him. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. What was I going to say? "Hey, I saw you with another guy. Want to explain that?" And give her a chance to deny it, twist it, make me feel crazy? No. I sat there and nodded again, like a fool. Like a husband still trying to give the benefit of the doubt even when the truth was already whispering in his ear. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her breathing, slow, even, peaceful. As if she hadn't just pulled the rug out from under our marriage with one carefully worded conversation. At 3:17 a.m. I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen for water. I stood at the sink, the silence of the house pressing in from all sides, and let the realization sink in. She was already halfway gone. I could feel it in the way she spoke. In the way she'd started deflecting whenever I asked about her day. In the way her phone never left her side anymore, face down on the counter, always silent. I started replaying moments from the past few weeks. The nights she came home later and later. The way she'd suddenly started dressing up more for work. The new perfume I didn't recognize. The workouts. The podcast quotes about personal growth and empowerment that felt less like inspiration and more like coded justifications. I hadn't seen it at first. I chalked it up to stress, to her chasing a promotion, to the new quarter pressure. But that was just the camouflage. The truth was she'd already made a decision. And I was just catching up. After that night, the air in our house changed. It wasn't one big explosion, more like a slow leak. A steady hiss that only I seemed to hear. The kind of thing you try to ignore until one day everything deflates. Ellie's trial separation idea hung between us like a painting neither of us wanted to look at directly. She still lived in the house. We still shared meals. But something was off, like she'd emotionally packed a bag and set it by the door. Waiting. Watching. I became hyper-aware of everything. Her routines shifted almost overnight. She started waking up earlier than me, which was new. Ellie had never been a morning person. Now, she was out of bed before dawn, already showered and dressed before I even hit the coffee maker. She wore makeup to run errands, her outfits a little more polished, a little more revealing. I told myself it was just a confidence thing. But deep down I knew she wasn't dressing for herself. A new perfume showed up on the bathroom shelf. Something floral and musky, totally different from the citrusy scent she used to wear. When I asked about it, she shrugged. Got it on sale. Thought I'd try something new. Her voice was casual, but she didn't meet my eyes. Then there was her phone. It became an extension of her. Always in her hand, always face down, and always on silent. If it buzzed and I glanced her way, she'd subtly tilt the screen away. Once I walked into the living room and caught the tail end of a conversation. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and when she saw me, she ended the call mid-sentence. Work stuff, she said quickly before I could ask. They're *ling me this week. Sure. And I wanted to believe her, I really did. But the trust was eroding fast, replaced by this awful sense of alertness, like I had to constantly audit my own home for signs of betrayal. It felt ridiculous at first. Paranoid. But once that first seed of doubt is planted, it grows like ivy. It wraps around everything. I started noticing how emotionally unavailable she'd become. We stopped having real conversations. Dinners were silent or filled with superficial updates, coworkers, deadlines, the weather. And when I tried to steer the talk toward us, she'd deflect. I just don't have the energy for this right now, she said one night, pushing her plate away. Can't we just have a normal evening? Normal. Right? Our bedroom was the worst part. It used to be where we reconnected, no matter how bad a day had been. But now it felt like neutral ground in a Cold War. She'd crawl into bed with a book or her phone and curl up under the covers facing the wall. I'd lie there watching the ceiling fan spin, counting the seconds between her sighs. There were no touches. No late-night conversations. Just silence and a few half-hearted goodnight mumbles. I began noticing the literature piling up on her nightstand, books and podcasts all centered on empowerment, independence, and reclaiming one's sense of self. At first, I was glad she was focusing on growth. But as the titles grew more pointed, untamed, radical rebirth, the path to self first, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming the villain in her personal redemption arc. One day, I found a journal left open on the kitchen island. I didn't go looking for it, it was just there, unattended. The page wasn't full of secrets, just a list. A vague bullet list titled, Things I Need to Figure Out. What I want. Why I feel empty. Whether love is enough. How to stop resenting him. How to tell Jake the truth. That last line stuck with me like a fishbone in my throat. I didn't say anything when she got home. I didn't bring it up. But something inside me shifted. I stopped pretending I was just imagining things. I stopped convincing myself that the distance was circumstantial. She was already having the emotional conversations I wasn't invited to. There was one night, a couple weeks after I'd seen her get into that car, that made everything worse. She came home late again, and I asked if she wanted to watch a show we'd started together. She paused, then said, "You know what? Go ahead without me. I'm kind of over it." That hit harder than it should have. It wasn't about the show. It was about the ritual. The fact that she didn't care about keeping up appearances anymore. "I feel like you don't want to be here," I said quietly. She sighed. "I'm here, Jake. Aren't I?" "That's not the same thing." She didn't reply, just left the room. I started checking timestamps, patterns. If she said she was going to a meeting, I'd check her calendar when she got home. If she said she'd been stuck in traffic, I'd casually ask where. Her answers were vague, inconsistent. She wasn't even trying to lie well anymore. And I knew I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. Distrustful, paranoid, obsessive. I hated it. I hated what this was turning me into. But I also knew I wasn't crazy. I found myself walking around the house like it was a museum of something already dead. Our photos on the wall felt staged. Her laughter, when it happened, felt scripted. And sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window with this distant look, like she was already imagining her life after me. I started pulling away. Not as a tactic, just out of self-preservation. I stopped asking where she was going. Stopped trying to be affectionate. I focused on work, hit the gym more, stayed out longer on purpose. If she noticed, she didn't say anything. One Saturday afternoon, I got home from a run and found her in the backyard on a video call. She didn't hear me come in. I stood in the hallway, just out of sight, listening to her laugh in a way I hadn't heard in months. Soft, sincere. She said something like, "You always know what to say," and my chest tightened. I stepped back quietly, went to the garage, and slammed the door so she'd know I was home. By the time I came inside, she was off the call. "You're back," she said, smiling. "How was the run?" I just nodded, pretending I didn't hear a thing. But inside I was cracking. That night, while she was asleep, I sat in the living room, staring at our wedding photo. We looked so young, so sure. I realized something then. I wasn't grieving the relationship we had. I was grieving the illusion I had clung to, that we were still in it together. She wasn't just slipping away. She was already gone. I think there's a moment in every unraveling relationship where the illusion finally breaks. Not just cracks, but shatters. For me, that moment came on a rainy Thursday, 2 weeks after the backyard phone call, and a full month after I saw Ellie step into that Audi. I had just gotten home from work when I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Normally, that wouldn't be unusual, except she was upstairs in the shower, and Ellie never left her phone behind. Ever. The screen lit up. "You made my day," smiley face. No name, just a number and a smiley face. But that was all it took to set my heart racing. I stood there, staring at the message like it might explode. I didn't open it. I didn't have her password. But in that moment really knew what I'd already suspected. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being paranoid or overprotective. I was being lied to. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it anymore. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I stayed up on the couch pretending to watch a movie. But my mind was elsewhere. Spinning through every late-night work call, every unexplained outing, every new friend I wasn't allowed to meet. I felt like a fool, and the more I thought about it, the more I knew I needed to do something I never thought I would. The next morning, I made a call. I didn't go to a friend or a therapist or even my brother. I called a private investigator. I found his number online, one of those guys with no social media presence, no fluff. Just a straightforward site that said he specialized in domestic clarity. His name was Alan. When we met later that day, I told him everything. I didn't even try to hold back. He listened without judgment, jotting notes like this was all routine for him, which I guess it probably was. At the end of it, he nodded and said, "Give me a week." That was the longest week of my life. In the meantime, I started doing my own quiet digging. I remembered something a coworker once told me about how Instagram's close friends feature can hide stories from certain people. I'd never thought much of it until now. Ellie had never posted anything questionable to her public feed, but something told me to check. I created a dummy account. No followers, no profile picture, nothing that could be traced to me. I followed her and waited. And sure enough, a day later, she accepted. 2 days after that, she posted to her close friend's story. Just one photo. A pair of nude heels, resting on the plush carpet of what looked like a hotel room. It wasn't explicit. It wasn't even incriminating if you didn't know what to look for. But I did. Those were her shoes. That was not our carpet. And she told me she was at a team-building seminar across town. I took a **T. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into the bedroom and demand answers. But I held back. Something Alan had said stuck with me. Don't tip your hand. Let her think you're still in the dark. So I played the role. I brought her coffee the next morning. Asked about her work trip. Nodded as she lied straight to my face. By the following Friday, Alan called. "You're going to want to sit down," he said. I met him in his office that afternoon. He slid a manila folder across the desk like it was nothing. Everything's in there. Photos, times, dates. She's been seeing him for at least a month. Probably longer. I opened the folder and felt my stomach turn. There they were, images of Ellie and the man from the Audi. The same guy I'd seen outside Ellington. They were together at a lakefront Airbnb, a wine tasting downtown, even walking through a farmer's market holding hands. She wasn't hiding. In fact, she looked happier in those photos than she had in months. There were receipts too, credit card charges for hotels, dinners, boutique stores I'd never heard of. All while we were supposedly figuring things out. It was like watching someone else live my wife's double life. I stared at one photo in particular. Them sitting on a park bench, laughing. Her head was on his shoulder. The timestamp was from the same weekend she told me she was visiting her sister. My hand shook as I set the photo down. "You okay?" Ellen asked. I nodded even though I wasn't. "How did I not see this sooner?" Ellen shrugged. "People don't want to see it. That's how they get away with it for so long." I took the folder home and hid it in my desk drawer. I didn't look at it again that night. I didn't have to. The truth was already burned into my memory. That weekend, Ellie went on another team retreat. She packed light, wore the same perfume, kissed me goodbye with a softness that made me nauseous. I didn't ask questions. I didn't show anger. I just watched her go. And when the door closed, something inside me finally clicked. She wasn't coming back. Not really. Her body might return, but the part of her that made us was already gone. That night, I poured a drink, sat down at my desk, and reviewed the evidence again. Every photo, every receipt, every timestamp. I sorted them by date, printed duplicates, and compiled them into a binder. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. If she was going to lie to me, she wasn't going to lie to a judge. By the time she returned Sunday evening, suitcase in hand and a fake yawn in her voice, I already had a plan in motion. She smiled and asked how my weekend was. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Quiet." She didn't even flinch. From the outside, nothing changed. Ellie still left for work at 7:45 every morning, latte in hand, kissing me on the cheek like she had for years. I still waved goodbye from the porch, still kept the lawn trimmed, still answered emails from my home office with the blinds cracked, just enough to watch the neighborhood move. But beneath that thin layer of normalcy, everything was shifting. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw the binder on the table or scream or demand answers. Instead, I started building my exit. Quietly, methodically. The first thing I did was separate our finances. I opened a new checking account in my name only and began routing my paycheck there. I left just enough in the joint account to keep up appearances, groceries, gas, the occasional takeout, but everything else was moved. I applied for a credit card she didn't know about and transferred our savings portion to a high-yield account she couldn't access. I wasn't being vindictive. I was being smart. She had chosen deceit. I was choosing preparation. Next came the legal groundwork. I booked a consultation with a divorce attorney, Rachel Harmon, recommended by a friend who went through a rough split 2 years ago. Her office was tucked into a quiet part of the city, warm-toned and efficient. She didn't flinch when I slid the binder across the desk. She opened it, flipped through the pages with practiced speed, and nodded. "You've done your homework." I wanted to be sure. She looked at me with a mix of sympathy and professionalism. Infidelity, this well-documented, gives us a lot of leverage. If you're serious about dissolving the marriage, I can have paperwork ready within 2 weeks. "I'm serious," I said, and I was, but I wasn't ready to serve her yet. Not until everything else was in place. I rented an apartment under the guise of needing a creative workspace. A small studio downtown, high ceilings, exposed brick, the kind of place I might have moved into right out of college if I hadn't gone straight from bachelorhood into marriage. I paid the deposit in cash, set up a P.O. box, bought a second phone under my middle name. When I furnished it, I didn't bring anything from the house. No shared decor, no sentimental leftovers, just the basics: bed, desk, couch, coffee maker. I kept it intentionally sparse. This wasn't a sanctuary. It was a landing pad. At night, I'd sometimes drive there after Ellie fell asleep just to sit on the balcony and breathe without the weight of her lies pressing on my chest. I also started working out again. Not for revenge. Not to win the breakup. But because I needed the structure. I needed the physical movement to dull the mental chaos. I signed up for a local gym and went early before the world was fully awake. The cold air, the hum of treadmills, the clink of weights, it became my reset button. And I picked up old hobbies I'd let go of. Sketching. Guitar. Reading novels that weren't just productivity hacks or business thrillers. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months, some in years. They noticed the shift in me. You seem lighter, one of them said over drinks. Working on it, I replied. The strange part was, Ellie never asked where I was going at night. Or why I wasn't always home for dinner. If anything, she seemed relieved. Like the less we saw each other, the easier her guilt was to manage. She kept up appearances, sure. She'd still ask if I needed anything from the store. Still left post-it notes with "Have a good day," smiley face on the fridge. But it was performative. There was no heart in it. Just muscle memory. Once I tested the waters. I asked her if she wanted to take a weekend trip together, just us, like old times. She hesitated. Work's been crazy. Maybe next month. That was her new mantra, next month. Later. Soon. It never came. I began documenting everything. Not just the affair, Alan had covered that, but the emotional neglect, the inconsistencies, the subtle gaslighting that had become part of our daily language. I kept a journal. Dates, times, conversations. It wasn't about building a case anymore. It was about building a record. So that if I ever doubted myself again, I could look back and remember exactly how things felt. There was one evening in particular I'll never forget. She came home late, the rain still clinging to her coat. I was on the couch reading. She looked surprised to see me. Oh, hey. Didn't think you'd still be up. Late night? She paused. Yeah. Drinks with the team. I nodded. You were tagged in a photo. Her face paled for half a second before she recovered. Really? I didn't see that. I didn't press it. I didn't even tell her the tag had been removed an hour later. Just one more thread in the unraveling sweater. That night, as she showered, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom looking at the framed photos on the dresser. Us on our honeymoon. Her laughing at some tourist trap. Me holding her hand on a beach somewhere, both of us squinting into the sun. I couldn't remember the last time we'd laughed like that. Or touched like that. I quietly took them down and packed them into a box. I was done pretending. In the mornings, she'd ask how I slept. I started replying honestly. Restless. In the evenings, when she asked if I wanted to watch something, I'd say no. I stopped pretending things were okay because I knew now she wasn't going to fix anything. She didn't want to. She was just trying to coast until she could figure out how to leave with the least amount of mess. But she didn't know I was already ahead of her. I was no longer trying to hold onto her. I was holding on to me. By the time the trial separation was down to its final week, I'd stopped counting the days. Not because I'd forgotten. Because I no longer needed the reminder. There was no figuring things out anymore. Ellie had already made her decision emotionally, physically, spiritually. She just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. So I decided to say it for her. Without words. That Monday morning, she left the house wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen before, a soft blush color that wasn't really her style but somehow suited her lately. Her hair was curled at the ends, effort that didn't match her staff check-in excuse. I stood in the kitchen drinking coffee, watching her pour herself a second-to-go cup like she always did. She looked over at me with that tired smile she'd perfected in recent weeks. I should be back around 7. Don't wait on dinner. I won't, I said. And I meant it. As soon as the front door clicked shut, I set my mug down and walked to the office. The binder was already open on the desk. I pulled out the essentials, the timeline, the photos, the screenshot *TS, and arranged them in a neat stack. Then I retrieved the envelope from Rachel, my attorney. It was thick, clinical, full of language about dissolution and division and irreconcilable differences. I placed it all on the dining table. Right in the center, like a final exhibit in a courtroom. I added a copy of the hotel receipt from her last conference, paperclip to a printed screenshot *T of her close friend's story, the one with her shoes and the hotel carpet. Below that, a printout of her text thread with the man from Ellington Street. I'd managed to pull a few messages from the dummy account she accidentally sent them to, thinking it was him. Her mistake. My clarity. Then, for the final touch, I wrote a simple note on a yellow legal pad. There's nothing left to explain. I folded the page once and set it on top of the stack like a bookmark. My keys went beside it, house and mailbox. She could have it all. I took only what was mine. Clothes, laptop, books, the small box of mementos I hadn't already thrown away. I didn't pack much. Just the essentials. I wasn't running. I was walking away. Deliberate. Calm. Ready. It was around noon when I locked the front door behind me. I didn't look back at the house. Didn't pause on the porch or take one last photo. It wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I went to the studio apartment I'd been quietly building my new life in. It still smelled like fresh paint and cardboard, the remnants of recent deliveries stacked near the closet. I dropped my bag on the couch and sat down, listening to the quiet. And for the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. When evening came, I ignored the instinct to check the time. No more watching the clock. No more rehearsing lines. I let the sun go down without flinching. Ellie would come home to a house that no longer contained a husband. She would walk in expecting silence, but not this kind. She would call my name and hear nothing. Then she would see the table, the evidence, the envelope, my note, and she would know. No screaming. No accusations. No, we need to talk. Just truth. When my phone buzzed at 7:26, I didn't pick it up. I saw the name. Let it ring. A minute later, a text came through. Jake, what is this? Where are you? Then another, we need to talk. Please. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I turned the phone over and placed its screen down on the kitchen counter exactly the way she used to do. Fitting. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony of my new place. The city was alive below me, cars weaving through intersections, people laughing outside a bar on the corner, lights blinking from windows I'd never noticed before. I stood there a long time, not thinking about her, not mourning the relationship, just breathing. This was the first day of something new. Not better yet, not easier, but mine. The next morning I went to the gym, then a coffee shop, then a bookstore. I stayed out on purpose. I wanted to give her time to sit with the reality, to let it soak in that there would be no confrontation, no begging, just absence. When I finally checked my phone, I had 12 messages. 4 missed calls. 1 voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I didn't need to. The last text read, I didn't think you'd actually leave. That was the closest thing to an apology she ever sent. And it told me everything I needed to know. I should have expected it. A week after I left, I got a letter from Ellie's lawyer. Not a response to my divorce filing, something else. A countersuit. She was accusing me of emotional neglect, claiming I had been controlling, manipulative, that I created a hostile domestic environment. It was surreal reading her words on that crisp white paper, twisted into a version of our life that barely resembled the truth. According to her, I had driven her to the affair by being cold, distant, and dismissive of her needs. She wanted a larger share of the assets. Compensation, even. It almost worked, almost made me second-guess myself. But then I remembered, I had receipts. I turned everything over to Rachel, texts, emails, the investigator's report, even a recording Ellie had forgotten about when she admitted during one of our late-night conversations that she felt bad for stepping out but didn't know how to stop. Her voice, her words. Her guilt, not mine. Court was messy. Divorce court always is. Ellie cried on the stand, told stories of a marriage where she felt invisible. I didn't argue. I let the evidence speak. And it did. When Rachel calmly introduced our documentation, the mood shifted. Ellie's story collapsed under the weight of facts. And just when it couldn't get worse for her, it did. Alan's report included a detail I hadn't paid attention to: the man she'd been with. He was married, with 2 kids. Turns out his wife had filed her own suit. And Ellie wasn't just the other woman. She was now a liability. She left the courtroom pale, shaking, avoiding my eyes. She didn't get what she asked for. Not even close. The house was mine. The accounts were split fairly, not favorably. Her professional life took a hit when whispers of the affair reached her job coincidentally during a promotion cycle. She tried to appeal. It went nowhere. There was no victory lap. No moment of glory. Just quiet closure. I moved to Austin 2 months after the papers were finalized. Not to escape, but to begin. A teaching position opened up at a local design college. It wasn't a big job, not the kind that made headlines. But it was honest, fulfilling, creative, everything I'd let go of during the slow erosion of my marriage. The apartment I found was small, sunlit, filled with plants I never would have thought to buy before. I cooked meals from scratch, took long walks, even started journaling. It was like I was reintroducing myself to my own life. The fear I once had that life without Ellie would feel empty turned out to be a lie I'd internalized. What felt empty before was the constant effort of trying to keep something broken from falling apart. Now there was peace. Clarity. I began volunteering at a community center, working with people who had gone through betrayal and loss. Not as a counselor, just someone who could sit and say, yeah, I've been there. And no, it doesn't have to define you. People ask if I miss her. If I still think about what we had. The truth is, I miss the idea of who I thought she was. But not the reality. Not the lies. Not the version of myself I became trying to earn love that had already been taken back. The pain didn't disappear. It transformed into something useful. And in that quiet rebirth, I found something I never expected to recover. Me.